So hello, I am delighted to be joined this afternoon by Philippa Hann. Philippa, I met about maybe 10 years ago or something in her capacity as a lawyer specialising in financial services, and we kept in touch, realising that we had a number of similarities in our personal lives, but also I think in our values and beliefs about leadership. So when I saw that Philippa was stepping out of law last year, at about the same time that I was stepping out of my own employed career, I reached out and we had a chat, and amongst other things talked about the thinking environment, which then Philippa subsequently attended a couple of courses with me last year, and then was appointed CEO at Paradigm Norton, very excitingly for them and for you too, I'm sure, Philippa. And she's agreed to have a chat with me this afternoon about the work that we did together and how that supported her in her new role. So Philippa, thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat this afternoon.
Thank you for asking me, Becca.
Oh, well, how's it going? How have you found stepping into the new role? What have you learned? How's it all been going?
Gosh, exciting, terrifying, wonderful, busy. It's really different. I mean, I spent 20 years in a partnership in a law firm, and it's all very single-minded in terms of what is expected of you, and that every 6 minutes of your day you have to justify, and so it's a really, really different environment to be in a financial planning environment, and I love the financial planning environment. I think people don't really understand the difference between financial advice and financial planning, and when you're in a financial planning environment, it is a lot more about the future and what you want to achieve, and a purpose and a principle, and the people. That's really the sense I'm getting from working in this new environment, and it's wonderful.
Fantastic. So as you've taken on the role of CEO then, how are you using the thinking environment work that we've done together to support you? Sort of, have you noticed yourself weaving it in?
Oh gosh, yes. Well, I use the thinking environment in all of my exco meetings. And when I do my sessions at the board, I will use thinking environment. So I've introduced the thinking environment, the meeting version of the thinking environment to all of the senior leadership team at Paradigm Norton, and it's been amazing how much we've actually managed to achieve, and how different, I am told, it feels in those meetings as a result of us using the thinking environment rather than your ordinary let's follow through an agenda and let's just say things as and when they occur to us. So using the thinking environment, I always use a round to start with, although 6 weeks in I'm thinking I must contact Becca and get some more ideas for rounds. In fact, the round I did the other day ended up being, what's the best thing you've bought for under £100 in the last 6 months? But it was quite good because we were talking about sort of budgeting things. But even using a round in that way at the start of a meeting, because quite a lot of the meetings that we end up doing, because we've got 4 offices across the country, because we're online, it's a really nice way to have some connection around the room. And I always say, you're not in the room until your voice is in the room, as taught by you, and it really makes a difference when everybody's had the chance to speak. And we always do appreciation at the end. And I think there can be a sense of appreciation. I just feel a little bit silly doing appreciation. But the result of it is there's always a feeling of being uplifted, for everybody, and everybody enjoys, even if they don't necessarily enjoy having the appreciation to themselves, there is a real pleasure in hearing somebody else give another person in the room appreciation, and often people will be nodding along, and I've sort of found myself leaving those meetings thinking, that's, even if there's been a robust discussion, having that uplift at the end with a round of appreciation, and it always feels sincere. I don't ever get the impression that people are saying, well, I like your top. They're always saying something more specific about the person. So those two elements have been really, really, really well received. And actually, at the board, when we were agreeing my strategy, and we had a lot of new people in the board because we were transitioning to a new group of people, so we ended up having sort of almost the exco and the old board in one place. And people forget, I think, that there is that role power. So if you're the CEO or the ex-CEO, or you're a board member, and somebody else is coming in who has been an employee in the business, the role power of I don't feel like I can have an opinion, or I don't feel like I should speak, is totally taken out of the mix. And in doing rounds to say, okay, this is a question that I would like your opinion and your decision on, and going around the room in that way, we developed a lot of confidence for everybody in the room, knowing when their turn to speak was, and being confident that what they had to say, everybody would listen to and everybody would be interested in. And we made some real decisions rather than simply having a discussion that not everybody was involved in.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm thrilled to hear all of that. And I think what really strikes me about what you've just shared there, Philippa, is how, so I think a lot of people will hear about the thinking environment approach and think, oh, gosh, it's just going to take forever. And how on earth do you get decisions made? But it sounds like you're finding it a really practical tool.
Oh, absolutely. I think it would be easy to make that assumption that, gosh, if we have to wait for everybody to have their opinion and go around the room. But what it really allows us to do is hear everything. You don't then get two people or three people who are interrupting each other, and then there's a sort of a whole discussion around that. And so what we tended to do was a round of, what are your thoughts? And then a round of, so what is your decision? I would like a yes or a no. And that is where the real magic happens as well, is I want to hear from you and I'd like your opinion, and you're not allowed to leave the room until I get that. Effectively. And so and you then hear from people that you wouldn't necessarily have heard from if they weren't in a thinking environment, and that really helps the decision-making process, because they bring their own individual thoughts to it, that if it were more of a free discussion, you probably wouldn't hear, and it would then go down a rabbit hole of wherever the two or three individuals thought that the important thing was, and so you avoid that. And you also avoid, I think you avoid some of the negative emotion as well around having to prove that your opinion is more right than their opinion, and having to persuade them. Because when you do a round in that way, you can simply have your own opinion, and it's fine if it's different to somebody else's. I think that's the other thing that feels really important in that thinking environment, and helps anybody who's in it to feel confident about voicing whatever it is that's going on in their mind.
You've touched on so many of the components there, the component of encouragement and that ceasing competition, the equality that it brings, difference. Yeah, there's a lot that, I guess, just changing some really quite simple things in the dynamics, in the way that we come to meetings. It really does, I don't know, it has all of these impacts on how people feel and how people show up and what they feel able to share. Ultimately how safe they feel to be able to give their opinions as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I've been in, before I did the thinking environment, I was in plenty of board meetings and senior leadership meetings, and there's always that those thoughts sticking around in your head. Should I say it? Should I not say it? Am I right? Am I wrong? If I say it, will somebody attack me or disagree with me? Will I feel stupid? Will I look stupid? And it's a lot of, what is everybody else going to think of me, because I need to get into this conversation somehow. But in the thinking environment, and your turn is coming, you can simply have your opinion, and there's no back and forth on it. And people can say in their turn, I actually disagree with what Philippa said, or I really agree with what Becca said, or whatever it is. But there isn't that, as you say, that competition and that need for your opinion to be more right than somebody else's. And somehow that thinking environment takes that emotional element of meetings, or that's potentially negative emotional intelligence away from the discussion, which actually makes things a lot better and a lot nicer.
Are you seeing changes or improvements in team performance, do you think, in using the thinking environment?
Yes. Yeah, I think I am. I mean, it's a relatively new team, and it's a slightly different team to the old team. So am I able to discern that it's different? No, because I haven't gone from one team to another team. But what we have done is very quickly get ourselves to a place where people feel very safe and where we can make decisions. And we can disagree, but I think we are moving very quickly, in part thanks to the thinking environment as a team.
That's really great to hear. I think that I can't remember where this saying came from, but the idea that reasonable people don't need to get their own way all the time, but do need to feel heard. And I think that's what I'm kind of hearing. And that's when, when we do feel safe enough to be able to share what we really think, and we feel heard, then, well, if the decision is one that we didn't necessarily agree with at outset, but we can see why it's been taken, and we can get on board with it, then, can't we?
I mean, exactly that. There have been, obviously there are still some people on the Exco who were on the previous Exco, and one of the comments that I've had is, I feel heard. I do feel heard, even if I disagree with the specific decision. I feel like my thoughts are being taken into account, and that's really important to run an effective team, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So have you I guess I'm wondering then, from a client perspective as well, because ultimately that's who we're there to serve at the end of the day, isn't it? The end client. Do you see this approach, or how do you see this approach impacting client outcomes at the end of the day? Can you sort of see the link there yet?
Yes, I think I always think we have to start with ourselves, so that we can feel differently about ourselves, so that we can behave differently with our colleagues, so that we can have different conversations with our clients. I think that's the course of that's the course of events. And not forgetting, I've only been in post 6 weeks, so give me a chance. What I am seeing, so we've implemented one-on-ones throughout the business as well. That's the other, internal. It's another big change that we've brought in. And I think in the first instance, for those colleague relationships, it's making a big difference. For the managers who are in their one-on-ones with their direct reports, one of the rules that we have is that the direct report speaks first. And if they can speak without being interrupted, again, it is, what are you thinking? Tell me your thoughts, your agenda. What would you like to talk about? And then allowing them to speak, which means that you can overcome a lot of those, I need to speak to my manager about something and I don't know how to say it, or I've got a stupid thing and I don't quite know how to have this conversation with a client, or I've got a difficult phone call to make and I don't know how to have that phone call. So you're having a lot more of those discussions internally because the manager is shutting up and simply saying, what is it? And I think in the receiving, we can then give, can't we? And when you've received that generative attention, when you've received that that listening, you then want to do it for other people. So I can absolutely see that in client meetings, there is or will be a different experience for the client in, tell me what's going on with you. Tell me your thoughts and your feelings. What's coming up at the moment? And can you imagine going into a meeting with your financial planner and them just listening to you rather than showing you graphs and tables and returns and, you know, all that overwhelming sort of stuff? So yeah, I can absolutely see that this will in time filter through to those discussions with clients, and it will feel very different to have a conversation with us.
That's exciting. That's really exciting. I think what I'm just hearing there in terms of the one-to-ones that you've implemented, it can be hard to be vulnerable, can't it? I think with somebody who, your manager ultimately does have some power over you. Again, you know, going back to that kind of power dynamic thing, much as we don't like to think about hierarchy and much as we try to flatten the hierarchy, like that is the reality within businesses. And so to be vulnerable and to go to your manager and say, I just don't know, or I've made this mistake, or you know, I'm having this client issue and I should know how to deal with it, but I don't really know how to deal with it. Please help. You know, that vulnerability can be really quite tough. And I'm sure it's the same for clients, actually. You know, to be struggling with something in their life that they can see or they perceive everybody else around them is, you know, very successful and getting on with things. And I think the thinking environment, listening in that way, and particularly without interruption, it enables that. It allows people to be vulnerable in that space, and like you say, not to have to worry about, well, when do I bring this up, when do I ask this question, how do I ask this question, is it even okay to ask this question? So yeah, I think it's a really lovely use, I think, and it's such a great relationship builder as well between managers and their direct reports.
Yeah, and that's the main purpose of that one-on-one, is to build relationships. It's interesting that you picked up on that, because if you can't have a good conversation with your manager, if you can't come in and tell them some good stuff, how are you ever going to have a difficult conversation? It's not a human thing, is it? So providing that psychological safety in the space and the regularity of it as well. So it is half an hour every single week. And all of our partners, so we call our staff partners, all of our partners know that they will have that time, which is specifically set aside for a one-on-one basis. And that is their time. It's their time to speak. It's their time to share. It's their time to talk. So yeah, it's proving already really, really powerful.
Fantastic. That's really cool to hear. So I was really interested to talk to you as well about this sort of succession angle, I suppose, because I'm seeing a lot of firms talking about succession, either in terms of perhaps a sale in the future, or bringing their successor up within the firm to keep things going and to kind of keep their legacy going into the future. And obviously, you've taken the reins from Barry. Fairly big boots to fill, I imagine. Have you found that the work we've done together has helped there at all?
Yes, so Barry and I, we have been meeting weekly since the beginning of the year. So we had a transitional period, and again, giving each other that regular time to come together and to create a space where we both feel safe to say, oh, I don't know about this, what's happening here? Or, you know, can you explain this? Or what's the history to that? Or whatever. So that's been really important. The other thing that we do, which is time to think-esque, is between everyone that's having a weekly one-on-one, we have a shared document. So rather than coming into the meeting with a whole lot of things on a list that I need to tell you this, this, and this, we have a shared document so that people can go into that document when they have that time to think. And we're not then having that asynchronous communication of, oh, I need to tell you about this, or I need to talk to you about that. All of that can come out of your head and go into that shared document. So when you come to have that meeting, and when Barry and I come to sit down together, and we do it in lots of different places, we find nice cafes, and you know, it's because, you know, the place matters, as you've taught us all. We can come to that feeling quite calm, because actually everything that we want to talk about is laid out. It's not a surprise to the other person. You can think about it before you go into that conversation, and there's no need to interrupt the other person, because it's on the list and you know you'll talk about it and it will come, and you can just allow the other person to speak, and you can listen to them. And Barry's an amazing listener. I have to say, he's very good at simply not interrupting, not speaking, and being thoughtful. So that has been a really useful part of our transition as well. And but giving each other that time, and holding that time almost sacrosanct, really, and saying, I promise that I will give you half an hour every single week without fail. You then don't have to hold everything in your head. You don't have to grab them in the corridor. You don't have to worry, when am I going to be able to get them on their own because there's a difficult thing I need to have a conversation with. That promise of, I will give you my time and I won't interrupt you every single week, has been absolutely central to our ability to do the handover as well as we have, and we have done it really well.
It sounds like it. I think the word is interesting that you use the word calm, like ease was coming up for me there. It sounds like it's a very easeful way to have conversations, which, you know, must sometimes be tricky, because there's it must be a tricky thing or a hard thing for Barry to be stepping away, and then you're coming in and not really knowing, you know, it's a new industry for you, although obviously you've known you've been around financial planning for a long time, but it's a new role, it's a new industry. It's challenging, must be challenging for both of you to be able to create the environment where you're having easeful conversations about the stuff that's coming up. I can imagine that's invaluable.
Oh, it really is. And at the start, we made promises to each other that, you know, if something happens and I need to raise it, I promise I will raise it. And if you need to raise something, I promise I will hear you. And that sort of, that I think people miss those little relational points sometimes when you're doing as you rightly say, that there can be quite a lot of emotion when you're passing, particularly from an owner founder. You know, it's his baby. He created it. You know, there was just him, you know, 20 odd years ago in an office thinking, right, what am I going to do? And he's created this amazing business. And so handing it over, there is inevitably quite a bit of emotion. And from my perspective, of course, as well, there is quite a bit of expectation and desire to do a good job and to not misstep. But accepting that, you know, both of us will make mistakes. Nobody can go through their entire life not making a mistake, and having compassion for oneself and for each other as well, and promising that compassion to each other is also a really important part of that the emotional journey around a big succession, or it feels big to both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. I think a lot of that is missed very often, because what is more common is actually, or of the experience that I hear more commonly is frustration between the founder, owner, and the successor. And I wonder if what I love about your list of things for across the whole business as well is that things don't fester. Then you're bringing them up when they're quite fresh, and it's not 6 weeks down the line and actually you're up to here with it, and you're bringing something up pretty early on. So yeah, that sounds like that. I mean, that must be helping.
Oh, I really think so. I really think so. And it is a change. And that's the other thing. So, when you're taking over in that sort of succession, when you're coming in, you want to do things differently. I've had my own experiences, and who wants to just carry on with doing it exactly the same way? Nobody does. And there are improvements. There's always opportunities for improvements. Of course there are. But that can sometimes feel like a criticism when you're changing something. So having that kind of, Barry would call it short accounts. And so sometimes, we'll say, okay, in the interest of keeping short accounts, what was going on here? So yeah, it's not left to fester. It isn't, because it's so damaging, isn't it? When somebody has said something, or you've read something, or whatever it is, and you make up a story in your mind of, or they just think I'm terrible, they're really regretting taking me on, or whatever it is that's going on in your brain, and finding out what the truth is never as bad as the terrible things that you torture yourself with if you don't have that conversation. So we are also introducing feedback mechanisms, and that is as simple as ensuring that there is good feedback more than there is bad feedback, because it's so easy to just say, well, you didn't send me the report on time. But actually it's much less common that people would say, oh, you sent me that report on time and I just wanted to say thank you for it. So more good feedback than bad feedback. And just having a feedback model, though, which goes something like, can I give you some feedback? Asking permission. Everybody always says yes. When you do this, that happens. When you get me your report early, it means I can prepare really well for my board meeting. So thank you for that. When you send me the report late, it means I don't have enough time to prepare for the board meeting. Next time, can you get it to me earlier? Finished. End. Done. So yeah, that's not allowing things to fester. Having that open communication both ways is really useful.
So are there any other examples or examples that come to mind for you where the thinking environment approach, you've brought that in and it's been really helpful?
Yeah, it was slightly brave of me. So I've been going around all the offices to deliver a roadshow about my new strategy and the internal changes, etc. And so I did the presentation, etc. And I mean, there were quite big groups. In Bristol, for example, we had 40 people in the room. But I decided that after having heard your experience at Emery Little of using rounds for perhaps 30 people, I thought we'll do a round with every single person in the Bristol office, in the London office, and in Exeter. Bristol being the biggest office. So at the end of my roadshow, we did a round, and I explained to them what a round was and how it worked, etc. And I asked them to give me two things. I asked them to give me one thing that they were really excited about with the new strategy, and one area where they might need some additional support. And it was incredible. Every single person engaged. Nobody gave it a half thought. Everybody was fully engaged in it. The young people got to see the more experienced people, and what they were thinking. The younger people were given permission and space and time to talk about what they were concerned about and what they were really excited about. I learned so much from everybody about how I need to support them going forwards. And at the end of that big event, really, for us, everybody had spoken. There was nobody in the room that hadn't said anything at all. And whilst people might think that, you know, doing a round in a room of 40 people was just too big and you couldn't do it, you absolutely can. And it was incredibly, incredibly powerful. And I just wrote down every single thing everybody said. I just had flip chart paper and wrote it all down, and now I've got it and I can go back to that. So it was incredibly powerful.
That's really great to hear. It's like you say, there's something about everybody getting to share their thoughts and have a say, and everybody's voice being heard, and also the information that you've got from that is gold, isn't it? As you come to implement that strategy and move forward, you know, the whole change management piece, I guess, which you must be thinking about a lot, is, you know, it's a challenge. Bringing people along with you is a challenge, and so that sounds like you've just set out on that. It's a great first step. Is there anything else before I've got one final question to ask you, but first I'm just going to ask, is there anything else that you wish I'd asked you or that you wish we'd covered this afternoon?
I think that the thinking environment has been so important to me in building a team where we have lots of trust in a very short period of time. It has been very different to what they've experienced previously, because it were just normal, you know, meetings, not because they were bad or anything. But we've been able to develop a huge amount of trust between us. B, we've had people who are now in a senior leadership position who were not previously, and it has also enabled them to be a fully engaged member of every single conversation that we've had. It's increased people's confidence. It's enabled me to make people feel different, and I think that's a really important thing for a successor coming in to a well-established team. And we've also laughed a lot because some of the rounds have been really fun, and people have been able to laugh and joke about them afterwards. We found out a lot more about each other, and whilst some people still feel slightly squeamish about the appreciation, it's been a really, really beautiful thing to experience and to see happen around the room. And I really feel like perhaps the relationship between two people has been slightly fractured in the past. But in giving them the space and the opportunity to think about something that they really admire about the other person, that has really created an experience for both of them, which is much more mending. And how often are you given the experience, or is there, how often do you have the environment created around you where everybody is choosing to say something that they really admire about somebody else? And that cannot be underestimated in the power that it brings to the relationships and the psychological safety of the people in the room.
Amazing. So quite a lot then going on. But it's so great to hear how you've really taken the thinking environment and really run with it. I imagine there is an element of being able to kind of come in and change things, and like you say, making people feel differently because of the way that you're doing things, kind of making it feel different under you as CEO. having the tools to do that. It sounds like it's all come at the right time.
It really has. So thank you to you, because I really think that the Time to Think courses that you run are the most life-changing. You know how people have those light bulb moments, and I genuinely didn't have any idea how life-changing it would be, or how different a person I would be at the end of the course to the beginning of the course. So thank you to you for bringing that into my world.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. Thank you. Well, thank you for trusting me. So final question then, Philippa. What one thing, if you were going to give somebody a tip to, I guess, help them have the conversations they need to be having, because that's what a lot of this is about, what would that one thing be?
Is to remember that you are not psychic, nor do you have a ball that tells you what the future holds. So I think often what holds us back from having those conversations is that we work a little film through in our heads of, if I have this conversation, then she's going to say this, and then I'm not going to know what to say, and then she's going to get mad, and then it's all going to blow up, and I'm going to have to move country. But you don't know how the other person is going to respond. And I'm actually reading a really amazing book at the moment called Humankind, which is all about the assumption that actually everyone you meet is good, and they want good in the world. And if you go into your conversations expecting good things and expecting that person to just be a human being, the conversations aren't anywhere near so scary.
Great tip. Thank you very much. So, Philippa, I so appreciate you spending time with me this afternoon. I have loved hearing about how you're putting everything that we did together into practice. And I really, really appreciate your enthusiasm and I guess your own willingness to be vulnerable, your courage in being vulnerable. It shines through, and I think, you know, it's sometimes quite hard to meet somebody who doesn't portray that vulnerability. I think it can sometimes feel like we then have to live up to their kind of perfect persona that they put out into the world. And you are courageous enough to be vulnerable. And I think as a leader, that is an invaluable trait. And it's something I really appreciate in you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So thank you very much. Great to chat to you this afternoon. Have a lovely rest of your day.
And you.